Hello, and welcome to another episode of Product and Cake. Today, as always, in the virtual recording studio, it is with me, Paul. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm good. Thank you, Goncha. How are you?
I'm really good. And also, today, as the normal way that we do in Season 4, we have an amazing guest.
That is such a pleasure that we are not alone here in our studio, because with us is Jacob Clark. Welcome to our podcast, Jacob.
Hey, good to see you both. Joining from sunny Manchester today, so that's awesome.
Oh, nice.
Great. And you are Director of Engineering at Hyperact. So I am looking forward already very much to the more technical discussion today. And you have a very impressive journey behind you. So you were Director of Technology at LexisNexis Intellectual Property Solutions, right? And Director of Engineering at Nearform, Head of Engineering, Principal Consultant. So I think you saw already quite a few things, and you have a very sharp perspective on product development and tech stuff. So will be a nice episode, I guess.
Yeah, I also seen some interesting names in the list of your very, very long list of experiences. And one was BBC that stood out to me. And the other one, if I'm not mistaken, Department of Education, right?
Yeah, that's right. I've done a lot of public sector work over my career, which has been both very interesting and very fulfilling as well.
Nice.
Before we dive into all of that, I want to start with a good old check-in question.
Of course.
Because to create some human connection, right? That is very beneficial if you do that in a remote meeting, even more. So, Jacob, I would like to go you first and answer the question. Are you spring, summer, fall, or winter? Please share why.
Oh, I think I'm a summer guy, actually. I just love the sun. It just fills you with, I don't know, so much happiness, I suppose. I feel really good, commuting to work, walking down the street and the sun's shining and you think this is going to be a good day, no clouds in the sky. So yeah, definitely a summer guy.
What about you, Goncha?
The trees are blossoming again, the birds are chirping, so it's a little bit of renewal in it. And I like to start things. I like to think of redoing things and starting fresh, greenfield projects. So I think I'm more of a spring. And also, to be honest, summer is sometimes too hot for me. And I feel like I cannot breathe. Even though I love the sun. Yeah. How about you, Paul?
Yeah, I also love the sun, but to be honest, this climate change killed a little bit my mood of summer and spring, because I check the weather app and I'm thinking, oh, damn it, it's not raining, it's too hot, it's out of average, everything is horrible. So that's why I'm slowly turning into a winter person, because I can sit in cozy in front of my computer, do stuff. It's very dark, nobody is doing much, and then it feels even better when the summer is coming out for a moment.
True. Also, ski. You can ski in winter, so important part.
True.
Yeah, very true. Yeah.
So, luckily, this podcast is independent from time and space, right? Exactly. You are listening it wherever you are, and we want to dive in. Concha, you start.
Alrighty. So, Jakob, is it Jakob or Jacob? Because we are recording in Germany. Most of my colleagues are a little bit annoyed when I call them Jacob. Is it Jakob or Jacob?
Jacob.
Okay, perfect. Jacob. Then can you, for those who don't know you, would you explain your job in one sentence? It can be also 2 sentences, but something really quick for everyone to understand what you're currently doing.
Yeah, for sure. I guess help organizations solve complex problems by building software, product-related, outcome-orientated technology capabilities.
Oh, wow. That was actually truly one sentence, and it was amazing. It was so to the point.
Can you, or does that mean you send outsourcing engineering teams to various clients, or what is it in a more project related way?
Yeah, it's a good question. more often than not, I guess I would sit there as more of a strategic advisor, maybe an architect looking at how organizations are either trying to modernize, maybe bring new product capabilities into the business, or even just, innovate or iterate on existing solutions. So really from a hands-on or strategic technology capability.
Mm-hmm. And can you quantify a bit the company? So how many people working with you together? How many are in your team?
Yeah, of course. So Hyperact is a relatively new startup product consultancy based in the northwest of England. We're really trying to grow. We're really trying to scale up our organization. I think, at our peak, we've had 25 plus consultants working on the ground with a few of our clients, including N Brown Group, which is a large retailer in England. And we've also worked with a bunch of interesting startups and scale-ups from CRM-based businesses all the way through to AI-based business as well. So very much a broad spectrum, I guess, but almost always focusing on the product engineering aspect. So building products that customers use and trying to get to good outcomes on the other end.
Oh, very interesting. And how did you end up here? So in general, in the product and tech world, and later on in the current role.
Yeah, really interesting question. So I'm self-taught. I'm one of those traditional self-taught engineers who has followed the waves of technology, I guess, over the last decade or so. Kind of fell out of college and I started working for kind of a marketing web development agency back in the day when it was mostly PHP and WordPress, and we were building plugins, right, for these WordPress sites. And, it was all kind of very, very noddy, so to speak. Then kind of developed some software engineering chops, moved into the Java space, working for more larger organizations. So that's when, I first joined the government and worked on a lot of government service modernization. That was right at the time when the UK government was bringing government digital services into, I guess, into the world. It didn't exist at that time, but it was starting to become a movement. Then transitioned.
I cannot wait. I cannot wait that moment to happen in Germany.
It's really interesting to see how that is now falling into other countries, right? It's really cool to see. Yeah, awesome. And then I guess kind of as time went by, technology has changed. Our approach to building software has changed. It became very user-centric. It became a case of how do we move faster? More nimble technology was needed. So really ended up in the world of things like Node.js and serverless, cloud-native systems, and more recently, really, data platforms and AI. And actually, I tend to find a lot of the conversations that I have these days with clients is how do we do AI, right? And almost trying to cut through the mustard and get rid of the snake oil and to what AI can actually help with, right?
Nice. After doing that for a while with blockchain, maybe. Oh, we need to have blockchain. Forget blockchain. We need to have AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was lucky. I managed to dodge the blockchain bullet. Thank God.
Nice. And so you said you were more on the architectural standpoint. So I think it is a super interesting job because most likely you will see a lot of different projects, right? And the company gets called when they need to have AI, or when everything is burning already, or when they start to have a new innovative approach. So when your role would disappear from one day to another, what do you think would break first?
Ooh, just repeat that last bit of the question for me.
So what do you think would not work anymore? What is dependent on your role?
Okay. That's a really interesting question, actually, because I think one of the things you get from being a consultant is variety, experience. I think if you had an organization, and some organizations do this, they have folks who have worked there for decades and they've never had any external experience. I think that's what consultants bring to the picture, right? We just have so much variety. We've seen all the different ways projects can fail, but we've also seen all the ways that you can rescue or push a project forwards, or potentially even innovate or save costs in various different ways. And I think that's really the benefit that a consultant brings to an organization. Not the big four type, big project consulting, but, the types of consultants that are going to embed in your team. They're going to leave their badges at the door. They're going to be a team member and work, with you as if they're permanent employees, and bring that experience, I guess, and just diversify the team. I think that's what a good consultant brings.
Yeah, awesome. And it could be super valuable for a team to get also this outside perspective.
Yeah.
Because especially if the team is working already quite a while together and they know what they do and what they not do, and then having someone from the outside who is saying, hey, I'm team member, I really like that approach and I want to have that succeed. And here's some new ideas and maybe some realities about AI, what it can do and what not. Awesome. What is a common misconception people have about what you do?
Really interesting. I think in the engineering space generally, I think there's a huge misconception that we spend most of our time writing code or actually building technology systems. And in reality, it's not the case. And I think this is even more true for the best consultants out there in the industry. But actually, we spend most of our time thinking, aligning, and optimizing for people and systems and processes. And, I very much like to think about systems thinking and organization design. And that is really where we spend most of our time. It's really interesting. I tend to say to folks who are just entering the industry, in reality, most technical challenges are already solved. The real complexity lies in getting to decisions, understanding what the trade-offs are, and kind of designing processes and ways of working for humans. And I think new entrants to the industry and folks more broadly actually should definitely spend more time on the human, the socio-technical aspect, right, of building products and technology, rather than, focusing wholly on, I guess, advancing their technical prowess. That's important, of course, but I think that's the general misconception I tend to come across quite a lot. Folks still seem to want to optimize for hands-on keyboard, which might not be the right thing.
Really interesting. I really loved what you said, that realistically, most of the technical challenges have already been solved and you need to now focus more on the different aspect of problem solving. And with that question or with that sentence already in mind, I want to ask you, what's the biggest challenge you're tackling right now?
Really interesting. That's really interesting. It's almost a cliche at this point, but I have to say it because it is taking up a lot of my thinking time, I guess. But it's the hype cycle around generative AI. But the fact that I think it's obscuring the real work, or I guess even worse, distracting organizations from focusing on the actual outcomes and values that they want to get to. I keep seeing all this talk, all these blog posts, all these kind of consultants in the industry saying, hey, we can get 10x productivity increases by putting AI into the workflow. And I think that's really, really interesting, because all of a sudden you're now chasing a 10x output dream without questioning whether output is actually the right thing to measure in the first instance. And I think for me, it's about bringing that conversation back to product and product engineering and thinking about, okay, so clearly generative AI is an enabler, but how do we look at the existing delivery system wholesale and identify where the constraints are, in reality, and could generative AI augment that, or maybe we don't need generative AI to get some advancements. I think about concrete real world scenarios. If you've got 4 or 5 developers in a team, and all of a sudden their output, their productivity doubles, triples in size, yes, they're going to be building software fast enough, but you probably aren't going to be able to validate with your users at the same pace that it's the right software to be building. And all of a sudden now you're in a loop of potentially building the wrong thing for longer at higher cost to rectify further down the line. And I think that's where I'm spending a lot of my time helping organizations understand.
And maybe AI is also not the best tool to give an answer to that challenge, right? Yes. Because you really need to see the big picture and maybe talk to a lot of stakeholders to identify that, because it is super hidden in this daily work life we have.
Yeah.
How are you incorporating AI into your workflows? So how is AI shaping your role?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think maybe 2 or 3-fold. As a consultant, as an architect, I think it would be the wrong thing to do to not remain hands-on in some capacity. So AI definitely is embedded into how I try to build or prototype or flesh out, MVPs of systems. I think not using it to build the system wholesale, but it's definitely reducing the amount of time I have to spend reading documentation to get something working or validating a concept or an idea. That's for sure. But I think on the flip side, it's also really useful as a sparring tool to validate ideas, get inspiration. Hey, I've got this gnarly problem. Let's talk through it together. And it's kind of just like having this buddy that I can almost pair program with or brainstorm with. So it's not necessarily that I'm looking to it for the outputs, but it's more that I'm looking to it for the inspiration, right? To just get my brain flowing. Yeah.
I totally relate to that, because especially when you transition into a more architect role or a very advanced senior role, it is the same for me. I remember, okay, I did all the stuff already years ago, like you said, with PHP and jQuery and the stuff and so on. And now I clearly know what to do, but with AI, I don't need to remember all the syntax, right? I just can tell them very precise, okay, do this and that, and then boom, it's there.
Very true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think right now, unfortunately, the listeners couldn't see the video that we are seeing right now. That how Paul's and my head were shaking when you were talking, and how much we agreed with what you said. And in connection to that, and to balance AI a little bit with a little bit more human touch, I want to understand a little bit from you. What do you do to bring a little bit more human intuition, human touch, and connection to the work that you're doing?
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. At least for the latter years of kind of my leadership experience, I've definitely positioned myself as a human-centric leader. I care more about bringing people together and kind of building a safe space, and the unit of delivery being the team. And I think how I get there, it has to be underpinned by psychological safety. The folks need to know that they're coming into that room with good ideas, and those ideas will be heard. And even if they're not the right ideas, the team will support and mentor and guide and coach. I think that's really important. But I think as well, you kind of can't underestimate the value of personal connection with individuals. I think, taking folks out for a coffee, grabbing a team lunch, right? Those things are really important. Actually, I found they're some of the most valuable things that I've ever done as a mentor or as a manager. Actually just spending time with people, getting to know them. I think it's really, really interesting. Folks have all kinds of motivators, and understanding what they are is for me one of the clearest pathways that I've got to success of building a cohesive team. I guess in light of AI, where everything feels a little bit more scripted and not very personable, building an environment where folks can just put raw ideas without feeling the need to go to AI to flesh them out or make sure they're perfect, I think is really important, right? Because that's how you get to the really good nuggets.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think this human connection, and unfortunately, I feel sometimes we lose that. We want to optimize things to just be the most productive version that they are. And productivity sometimes for me doesn't necessarily mean that this is bringing the best out of everyone. So I fully agree there.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. I once worked for a retailer in the UK called the Co-op, which is a 100-year-old company, actually, really, really interesting, owned by its members. And we truly kind of took on systems thinking, right? Theory of constraints and understanding that. And we had a big banner behind the team, actually, that said, sometimes the best work is no work. Having team members who are idle, maybe they're learning something, maybe they're pair programming with somebody else. But yeah, you don't have to get 100% kind of usability of the folks on the ground, right? There can be downtime, and that can really accelerate your ability to deliver, actually.
Yeah, that is definitely a big challenge of our times, especially when psychological safety in a team is not only in danger from the upper management or the other stakeholders, but also from this somehow generic feeling of, oh my gosh, now something can do my work, maybe tomorrow already. So what would you say to your maybe junior engineer if he's afraid during your coffee date and is saying, oh, damn it, I think I should stop my career here?
It's really, really interesting, actually, because the value of us as engineers is not necessarily in the code that we're producing. Yes, that's valuable, but we're knowledge workers at the end of the day. We understand how organizations work, the intricacies between the organizations. There's very few businesses out there that can be built from a single code base or a single set of problems. Most enterprise organizations have hundreds of engineers, hundreds of systems that need integrating with, all built in various parts of kind of the technology evolution cycle. Some of those systems will be legacy. Some of those systems will be very new technologies. I think generative AI is going to enhance our developer workflows. And yes, it will potentially have some implications. For example, if you solely use generative AI to write code, you're very likely to forget how to actually type it yourself, and you're going to forget SDKs and APIs and all that good stuff. So yes, there's some downsides, but actually you're going to be able to spend more time building actual user value, because all that time you would spend reading documentation and understanding APIs, it's gone. So you as a junior engineer can actually get to outcomes faster. I think my advice for folks entering the industry would be to spend more time on systems design, the broader, like, how do you get something into production? How do you secure it? How do you integrate with other systems? That's stuff that AI can't really do today, and I think is an invaluable skill.
Totally agree. I would also add the aspect of having fun with all these new tools, right? Don't see that as a treat, because what you said is totally right. It is still our job, especially as an engineer, to understand this requirement and make that working with the full fledged of possibilities inside. But having fun doing it and trying out all the new stuff, and it feels like every week is the greatest week in AI of all times. And then the next week came. We recently in the team introduced a monthly AI meeting where we everybody gets 10 minutes of time to share what they did with AI. Totally open, does not have to be work related. So it's a great fun to see what everyone is trying out, and you will always learn something new because it is already much too much. And you need to learn somehow how this stuff is working. And this is the perfect segue to my next question. So what's one thing you wish you had learned earlier in your career?
Yeah, this one's really, really interesting. Maybe got a few angles. Some of it I wish I'd learned 5 or 6 years ago, and I was thinking it then, and some of it I'm thinking it now. I actually think like core maths and calculus, I really wish I'd have been good at that back in school, and I'd have had a better grasp on it today. Learning how all the different deep learning algorithms work is a slog today for me. Someone from a traditional software background and data background, not a machine learning engineer. The barrier to entry is slightly higher than what it maybe could have been if I'd have got that stuff back in the day. But I think more generally speaking, I wish I'd have focused less on technology actually, and being like the best coder back in the early days of my career. And I'd have instead spent a little bit of time understanding better things like emotional intelligence and situational awareness for the folks around me, and maybe even theory of constraints as well. I kind of look back on those days where maybe I would have stayed behind in the office after the rest of my teammates had gone, and I would be churning out code, I would be closing tickets off, and then I would leave 3 hours later. I was oblivious as to why that wasn't a good idea, and actually was probably leading to worse software on the other end. And I still see lots of engineers falling into that trap today. There's nothing to say you shouldn't code in the evening or do your own stuff, but actually, if you're working as part of a team, you have to understand that there's constraints, and the delivery unit is the team, it's not the individuals. And I wish I'd have been more cognizant of that much, much earlier in my career.
That's very beautifully said. What's a product and tech opinion? What's a strong product and tech opinion you have that maybe not everyone agrees with? So basically your hot take in the product and tech world.
Interesting. I've spent a lot of time in my career trying to convince people not to reinvent the wheel and not to do it yourself. And even if you can't get to 100% parity of what you would like with something off the shelf or something commodity, you should still probably do it anyway, because the time you can then spend building the novelty and the stuff that actually matters to your business is probably far more impactful than rebuilding the wheel. I spent a good chunk, many years at the BBC, helping them shift away from a proprietary app wrapping framework and towards more modern web technologies such as progressive web apps and Capacitor, which is a hybrid app wrapping framework, and successfully managed to get there. But it was challenging. It was a challenging time. Of course, you kind of get the interesting arguments that, but we're going to lose control. We're going to have to give up all of this nice functionality that we have today. But in reality, by letting go of all of that and kind of treating it as a commodity, just like you treat electricity as a commodity, you can focus more on your users and the outcomes and the needs that those users have, I guess. And I suppose most engineers don't feel comfortable with that because they're handing off control. They like to know how things work and they like to have invented those challenges. But yeah, I think that's something that maybe not everybody agrees with, but I think especially as things like generative AI lower the barrier to entry for competition and I guess the industry as a whole starts to saturate, I don't think we as engineers have any choice but to start picking more off the shelf and thinking about commodities, I guess.
That's very true. And I think beside the control, there is the aspect of thinking in the long run, you need to rely on the external company, external tool, and you're kind of become dependent on them. So that's also one of the reasons that, at least in the recent years, in the bigger companies, that they have the bandwidth, they have the resources to put on building that the tool themselves. They'd rather do it internally, mainly because of the part of it is, I agree, is the control of the technology, but also the dependency. And I fully agree. Any time that you can pick something off the shelf, you should do it, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
We call that not invented here syndrome.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought for years that only engineers have that, but I just recently learned that also some or the other product manager suffers from it, and they say, no, that is our USP. We need to have something individual. And then I think it's a strong thing of an engineer to say, hey, no, I can just install this package and then boom, done. Okay, then.
Yeah, 100%.
Concha, I think it's time for us to dive into some important yay, nay questions. What do you think?
Yes, the fun part of the podcast. So it's a rapid fire product and tech dilemma questions. I say a couple of statements and I want to ask you if you agree with these questions. So if it's a yay for you or if you don't agree and if it's a nay for you. So are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, great. So the first one, engineering team should be allowed to work on pet projects that aren't aligned with the product roadmap.
Yeah, I think so. I think giving engineers some time, it could be time boxed, it probably should be constrained, but giving them some time to flex their prowess and maybe look at new technologies and also new ways of doing things could be useful. I guess bonus points if you can somehow relate that back to the business, that feels like maybe a good constraint. But yeah, generally speaking, I think R&D and innovation is important.
And how would you operationalize that? So meaning, would you say we follow the Google rule? I think it's not that anymore at Google, that they can spend one day at a week on their own projects, like back in the days? Or would you say just cut out some time? What would be the official guideline?
That's a good question. I've done this a few ways in different organizations. Sometimes you just choose Friday afternoon. It's a lull time anyway. You know, folks start to check out and get a little bit tired by 1, 2 p.m. So maybe giving them the afternoons to focus on R&D and innovation. I guess the other approach you could take is some percentage of a sprint time, for instance. Again, I guess depending on the approach you take to constrain the ideas might influence how you operationalize that. Again, I've kind of seen some folks as well innovate this way by building developer tooling to fix kind of common challenges that teams have. And maybe you would invest a bit more time into that, for example. But yeah.
Yeah, or currently at my current company, we have something called Inno Days. And it's almost a full week out of every quarter that anyone can participate. It's kind of like a hackathon style, startup weekend style but it's almost a full week. and you can spend, and anyone can join. So someone from sales team can join and share their idea, and other people can say, oh, actually, I'd like to work on that idea. Let's do that. And I really like it. It's really cool. All right, the second one. Usage data is more important than qualitative feedback when prioritizing roadmap items.
Oh, that's really hard.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because of course, like with quantitative data, you are going to get a very broad view of how the system's operating, what people like and don't like. But a qualitative view is going to be far more in depth, but might actually only represent a very, very small sample size. And you might end up making a change that actually the vast majority of your users really dislike. I don't know if I can say yay or nay. I'm in the middle. I think it's highly context specific. I think you're going to have to decide which one is more important based on where you're currently operating in and what your users look like. If you pushed me for an answer, I would say nay.
Okay. All right. I would say yay. I think quality feedback, unless it is vetoing something completely or it's a full-on blocker, gets slightly lower priority if the usage data is showing strong signs that, okay, users need this, users want this, users are using the product like this. And then there is a qualitative feedback that is from a smaller sample. If it's not a blocker completely, I would say, yeah, you should still continue with the usage data. But as you said, similar to a lot of things in the product and tech world, we don't usually have a very clear yes and no answer. It's maybe we need more information kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right. Last statement. Developers should be responsible for writing product documentation instead of product managers.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's probably a whole team sport. I think product engineering generally is a whole team sport, but yeah, I guess engineers are going to be very close to how things work. They know the details inside out. They should likely collaborate with the rest of the team to get the wording right and understand that, the context of what the documentation is being written in and make sure it applies to all audiences. But, they should definitely be heavily engaged in that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I fully agree, especially when it comes to maybe a little bit more technical documentation, such as ADRs. I would fully see it in the responsibility of the tech team to drive that, and then for sure get input from a designer, get input from the product manager, from data, and etc.
Yeah, it really interesting. Actually, ADRs are a fantastic way of doing that, particularly if you can bring. One of the practices I've done at a couple of organizations is just before you get to sprint planning, going through the top 5 or 10 stories on the backlog with a UX, a business analyst, and an engineer, and actually writing down the implementation detail and making sure nothing missed and documenting that as an ADR. That's a really powerful approach because you go straight into sprint planning and everybody knows what's being built and it's very well fleshed out.
Yeah.
That contained a lot of interesting insights. Thank you so much for sharing, Jacob. What is the one thing that is your side project at the moment, your pet project, or what is something you are currently learning?
Gotta pick a good one. I think I think in reality, again, it focuses on the Gen AI side of things, but it's not how to use generative AI. It's not how does it work under the hood, but it's what are the ethics, what are the moral obligations, the social, and even things like climate and better understanding that. What's the implication of these things actually on society? And how can organizations kind of avoid falling into those traps and make sure they're steering themselves the right way? So spending a lot of my time understanding, the compute and the power resources that different models use and how often do they change and that kind of interesting stuff. That's where I seem to be spending a lot of my time. Yeah.
Awesome. That is a very important aspect. I think a lot of people are not fully aware of that when generating a lot of pictures or expanding and shorten bunches of pages of text. Do you publish that somewhere, or where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I recently published Hyperact's Principles to Responsible and Ethic AI Development over on Hyperact's blog post, hyperact.co.uk. But we're also publishing interesting thought leadership type stuff as well on our LinkedIn page over at Hyperact.
Nice. Amazing. And I think that concludes our podcast for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And a last question, where can people find you? Do you want to be found? Do you want to be found on LinkedIn or anywhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. The best place to find me is LinkedIn. I'm Jacob Clark. I'll just search for Jacob Clark, of course. But yeah.
I hope you can find the links also in the description. That depends very much on our AI agent who needs to understand what we said and find the right links. If not, drop us a line or just search on LinkedIn for Jacob Clark. I think it's definitely worth it. Thank you so much for joining. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
Thanks for joining. And also, you can find all of this information on our newly created LinkedIn page. We have now a page dedicated for Product and Cake. You can find all of our previous guest information, our future guests. If you have any questions, you can ask there. So you can find us easier, much easier there. You can find everything there.
Yay.
You can also follow it. You can invite your friends to follow it. You can also subscribe and like and do all the nice things to a podcast. You can give us 5-star rating everywhere you listen to this. It would be amazing. That would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.